You are listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Megan and Alex of Zesty Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you have come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, we use the 4 phases of the feminine cycle in combination with functional lab work to transform the lives of the women we work with. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own doctor before making changes. Ready to take control of your health? Let's get started.
Hi everyone, this is Alex Golden of ZestyGinger.com. Thank you so much for joining this podcast. I am so excited. This has been something that Megan, my business partner, and I have been planning for a really long time, and it just was never the perfect time to do it, and that perfect time is now. So I'm so excited to be here, and thank you so much for joining us. The point of this podcast is to help you understand your own feminine cycle. Now, this is something that is not talked about nearly enough in our culture. If you have ever seen any tampon commercial, and next time you see one, take note, you will see that there's women in business standing up in a suit giving a presentation. There's some chick playing tennis, and everything is just going. And the whole point, the whole underlying kind of message to everything is, hey, don't let your period stop you. Don't let your period be anything. Don't let your period even be noticeable to you. And that is something that we just so strongly disagree with. We really believe, and what we do with our teaching is to teach women about their own feminine cycle and the importance of syncing with it. And so by syncing with your cycle, what we really mean is that you are living your life in a way that honors the natural ebbs and flows of things that are going on in your body. So we've broken up the cycle into 4 distinct phases, and we'll talk about those. We'll have a separate class for each of those, and actually multiple ones, just because we want to break it down into very discrete, easy to follow steps. And we break those 4 phases of the cycle up, and there are things that your body does that are unique to each different phase. And that's how we were able to, by looking at the physiology, by looking at what's happening in the body, break it up into 4 phases that have their own distinct characteristics. So let me just give a couple examples to make this more real. So phase 1, it starts when you get your period. And what we call the dark sub phase is the first 3 days of your period. Now think back to the last period that you've had, if you have a cycle right now. You may have wanted to hang out on the couch. You may have wanted to put your PJs on, your comfortable pants, or your cookie pants, as some of us call them, and watch Netflix and relax. But most of us are like, I can't do that. That's ridiculous. Like, I have my period, but that's not a reason to stop. And here's the thing. We are actually all about that, because the first phase of the cycle, especially that dark sub phase, the first 3 days, is a really powerful time for your body and for your mental state to do some really deep work and come up with a plan for what you want to happen in this next cycle. And so it's a great time for introspection. And physiologically, what happens is that your right hemisphere of your brain and the left hemisphere of your brain, what they do is they communicate really well together during this time. And actually, it goes outside of the dark subphase. That whole phase, that first phase, is all about good communication between the 2 halves of your brain. And what that gives you is an enhanced opportunity to evaluate what's going on in your life and then begin to create positive changes with that. And so it ends up being really powerful, because instead of feeling lazy, during that time you have your period, you instead understand that you are honoring your body with rest. And when you give your body that rest, you begin to hear your own internal voice and guidance coming through, and it will lead you to the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step, so that you are no longer chasing after different diets. You're cutting out all sorts of food. You can't digest half the things you eat. Your PMS takes over your life. All of these things that we almost as women become to think as normal. Like, it's normal to have really bad PMS. It's normal to have really bad cramps. When in reality, none of that works the way it's supposed to work. And so that is just an example. And then with that, the second phase, the rise phase is what we call it. That's when our hormones are powerfully rising, and the rise phase actually ends when we hit ovulation. And so during that time, when you take the time for introspection and you take the time for planning during the first phase, the second phase is when you're going to feel energetic, powerful, decisive, and you are going to get stuff done. And so that is a really amazing place to be, because when you take that opportunity to plan and know exactly what your own internal guidance is asking you to do and what your body is asking for, then you'll see in that second phase, things just take off at warp speed. You end up being really productive. You end up getting way more stuff done for yourself and even for others in less time than it normally would have taken you. It's really sort of miraculous. And then towards the end, the fourth phase, which is we call the pause phase, is a time for not only going back and doing some evaluation of how this cycle went. How did that rise phase go? What would you have done differently? What would you change? What will you change next time? Because that's kind of the beauty. You have way more cycles coming up, so that's not a huge deal. And the point of the pause phase is also to begin to integrate this in your life in a way that is manageable for you. So something that we don't believe in is, for example, if you do the Whole30, you do really, really great, but in your head, you're kind of in chronic deprivation. Like, I just can't have that food. I can't have that food. I can't have that food. And then when you're finished with your Whole30, you go ham on some donuts and croissants, and then you kind of backslide into exactly what you were doing. We have done that yo-yo rat race dieting thing, and we are very much over it. I love the Whole30. I think it's great, but the problem is people don't use it responsibly. It's not, it's on and off. So they're either on the wagon and they're being really strict, or they're off the wagon and they're just going ham on whatever food you're going to have. So instead, what we do in the pause phase is, as you've purposefully chosen what you plan to include or do in your life, then you have a period of time, this phase week, where you integrate it and find a good balance so that you don't have deprivation. And so I'll give you an example. My husband and I, about once a month, we will take our dog Whiskey the bulldog. He's an English bulldog. He's super cute. I'm a little biased, but we go get donuts in the morning on a weekend where neither of us work. And it is a really special time. And there would have been a period of time where I would have spent the next week worrying about those donuts. So I have celiac, so I have to eat gluten-free, and they have gluten-free donuts. But I would have been thinking, oh no, it's going to set off my SIBO that I used to have. Oh no, it's going to make me fat. What about that cellulite? Oh no. And all of these things would have come into my space. Instead, what I've realized now is that instead of cheating by inhaling a donut and then feeling guilty about it, I have purposefully allowed things into my life that make me feel good on the inside, whether they be actual food or an experience. And that for us is a ritual that we have. It's something that brings us closer. It's something that lets us get outside and be active while we go walk and get our donuts, and we come home and we drink coffee and we sit and talk and catch up over the week. And for me, that's really important. And that no longer gives me anxiety, because I have purposefully decided that will be part of my life. And that's just one time when I was doing the fourth phase, the pause phase, and that is a decision that I made to include in my life. And because of that, I don't have those things where I I get stressed out, I feel bad, and I go inhale a bag of Swedish fish. That doesn't really happen. And it's not a willpower thing. It's not that I've gotten better at being like, oh no, I shouldn't do that. It's just that I don't find myself going there because I've already kind of nourished and taken part of all of those things that experience gives me. And so I'm not looking for it at the bottom of a Swedish fish bag. I am actually living it. And so that all is a really long introduction and a kind of a verbose way to say that that is our major shtick, and what you'll be learning in this pod class from Megan and I, of all of the things that go into this. And what our hope is that by the time you finish this pod class, you will have a really clear understanding of how your cycle works. You will understand what the body is trying to do in each phase, and then how you can positively impact and how you will live your life in such a way that is syncing with your cycle, which is what we're going to call it. I wanted to take the rest of this class, though, and tell a little bit about Megan and I. So I'm Alex. I'm the brown-haired one. Megan is the ginger, hence the zesty ginger. And I am an MD. At the time of this recording, I'm finishing residency and going on to do a pain fellowship, but maybe when you're listening to this, I've already finished that. Who knows? But I've been on, a journey to become a pain doctor for, close to a decade now, and I am at the very tail end, thank goodness. My story is that I was born in Russia, moved here when I was 6, and moved here with my family. Grew up in a, poor-ish but very happy immigrant family. Went to school. I went to college to become a piano performance major, and I was going to be a piano professor at the college level. That was my thing. But right after getting to college and starting, I began to have chronic pain. I had never had normal cycles, really. Even when I started having my period at the age of 11, I had horrible cramps. I would have to come home from school because I would have such bad pain that I would throw up the first day, and I couldn't keep anything down, and I would just look like green around the gills because all the teachers would always be like, you don't look good, just like go home. So I never really made it a cycle without having something like that happen where like everyone in my life would know like Alex is out for the count. And that got better on its own as I went. But then all of a sudden there was a sharp downturn when I got to college, and it was probably the change of food, the change in stress, all of that set it off. And I started to have really bad pelvic pain, and then as pain tends to do, localized pain begins to get generalized in the body, and I had chronic widespread pain whenever anyone would touch me or squeeze my arm or like give me a pat on the shoulder. I would just feel the imprint of their hand just like burning my skin, and it would hurt so much. And my life really deteriorated from there because I went from being a relatively healthy kid to just completely debilitated. I spent all day thinking about what clothes I would put on so that the belt or the drawstring of my pants wouldn't cut into my skin and hurt me, the way I was sitting, the way I was moving, the way, timing going to the bathroom, like all of this stuff just began to consume my life. And the silver lining of that, I had horrible experiences with doctors who just dismissed me. Now in retrospect, even though I would cry for days about that stuff, where I would be like, someone's saying that I'm making this up, someone is not believing me, I just seemed crazy to them. And the silver lining was that then I shifted gears, and even though I finished up my piano performance degree, I started taking pre-med classes and ultimately went to medical school and have been doing residency in Chicago. And so that I ended up doing, everything a little bit backwards, just because conventional medicine really let me down. I mean, it was always, for all my period stuff, it would be try birth control, which I did, and that didn't help. And then, I got off of it and it made it even worse. I really began with all my reading, I began to do all the unconventional stuff. So after a period about 4 or 5 years where I really struggled on my own and was kind of in my despair phase, then I just thought, okay, let's get this together. Let me get things going in a more positive direction. And I began to do some functional stuff. So I started pelvic floor physical therapy and physical biofeedback for managing my chronic pain. I started doing breath work. I started doing acupuncture. All sorts of herbs. If you don't know me yet, you will know that I am a huge plant nerd. I have all these plants in my house, and I grow herbs all the time and use them as dried spices, teas, all of that. So that's where I got my start in all the herbalism and sort of supplements that I do. And so that lasted all up until medical school. And then in medical school, I had a little bit of a relapse, and I thought, well, I'm in medical school and I know a reproductive endocrinologist. Let me go check in with her about all my hormone stuff. I constantly had spotting. I constantly just had all this stuff that was happening that I never really knew. But all in all, I was at least headed in the right direction. After I saw that reproductive endocrinologist, she was like, oh my gosh, your hormones are just ridiculously low. That's why you are spotting all the time. So she put me on estrogen, progesterone. I did a whole cycle map where she did ultrasounds every 3 days, blood work every 3 days. And it really was like my first half of the cycle was okay. Second half completely bottomed out and I felt like crap. And so I started supplementing with hormones, and that really allowed me to, while I was doing that and getting some help with symptoms, I did more and more work, and I switched to paleo. I completely rehauled my beauty routine and everything that went on my skin. I got cleaner products. I did all of that stuff that manages detoxification and exposure to hormone mimicking chemicals. And eventually I was able to come off the hormones. Then, residency hit, and residency is, 80 hours per week working or so, not every week, but between 60 and 80 is usually normal for us. I'm an anesthesiology resident, and I really began to suffer a little bit just from lack of sleep, lack of nutrition, all of that stuff. At the same time, my husband and I, who's also a doctor, had gotten married, and we were trying to have a baby. And after about 6 months, I thought, I've had a lot of problems here. Let me go get checked out. I went to another reproductive endocrinologist who did some testing and said, oh, you're going into menopause. You've had so much destruction of your ovaries from endometriosis that I'm not sure how much tissue you have, and it's also all of your organs are just all stuck to each other in one ball inside your pelvis. And I was like, oh, well, that explains, half the stuff that I've been experiencing, and I don't know why, it got worse a lot or quickly. I, of course, always have felt like, boy, couldn't someone have caught this beforehand? Like, did it really have to get so bad? And I've had to let that idea go because there's nothing I can do to go back in time and change that. I did 3 rounds of IVF, which failed. And ever since then, Megan and I have been on this track. We came together when I was in medical school and started working together, and she worked with me through all of this, and this is how we have ended with this whole concept of syncing with our cycles. I mean, it's something that for her and I, we have grown together, and we essentially made from scratch. This is not, you won't find this information anywhere else. The information that you're going to listen in these podcasts, it was Megan and I sitting down with countless textbooks, looking at the female cycle, thinking about what's happening, and beginning to start from scratch, building how do we believe is the best thing. And this is something that we have lived through for years. And so with all of that, I'd love to say, then I got pregnant, had a baby. We have not made it that far. We kind of put the baby stuff on hold while I did my career, which I have been happy with that decision for sure. But for anyone struggling with infertility, know that I completely understand where you're coming from, and know that even though I haven't made the decision to have a baby or try again with IVF, I fully believe like that my life now looks so different. Like my pain is nearly gone. My cycles are a lot more regular, even though I do night shift. I work 20-hour calls. I do all sorts of stuff that in theory we know isn't great, but that's what I'm doing with my life. So obviously I can't be like, sorry guys, not coming to work. But so much better. It has truly revolutionized my life and even my relationships and everything that I do. And so that's why, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. That's kind of been my spiel. Now I'll talk a little bit about Megan. We are just the best of friends, and she's like my other half, really. I think our husbands get a little jealous. So I will tell, even though she's not here recording this with me, I'll tell a little bit about her. So Megan is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. She's got her husband's a Marine, and he's about to stop and also do some health coaching. And then they have two amazing girls, a 7 and a 2-year-old right now, who are just so fun. And Megan's story really started, she was also kind of a healthy kid, and her health took a really sharp downturn. She was working as an engineer, which I tease her for because sometimes she'll get her analytical hat on. And she got pregnant with Lily, her first child, and afterwards just completely fell off a hormonal cliff. I mean, she thought that it was normal because it was first time mom and it's supposed to be hard, but she literally had such chronic fatigue and just dysfunction. She like couldn't even get through the day normally, which many of you can probably relate to with chronic fatigue and hormonal imbalances. And then, now I've seen her over the years. She's her second pregnancy. I obviously wasn't around for the first one, but her second pregnancy was completely different. Her postpartum experience was completely different. She was, creative. Even like a week after giving birth, her and I were back on the phone. She had amazing ideas. She wanted to, she was taking time, but I was still doing stuff, but she was heavily involved. And just to watch her go through that and like really enjoy the experience and feel like she got the most out of spending time with that little baby, and feeling like she could handle the work and the sleep and all of the anxieties that go into having a new baby and all of that stuff. It was just so miraculous to watch. So both of us have had life-changing transformations, and we're so excited to get this information to you. So thank you for joining for lesson 1. I'm so glad that you have decided to take this step. We think that your health is going to, and your life is going to change for you once you start syncing with your cycle, because it really has for us. So thank you so much for joining. I will catch you on the next class. See ya.
Hey, thanks for stopping by this pod class. If you are ready to dig deeper into your health, really understand your cycle, stop guessing with random supplements, and start testing, our Healthy Hormones group starts September 27th. You can find more details at zestyginger.com/healthy hormones and find out if this is the place for you. And as always, we offer free 20-minute consultations, so jump on the phone with us and we'll help you decide if it's a good fit.